Me again, Louise Hvala. In this episode of Gatehouse Insights, I'm finding out about strengths-based development, why focusing on your natural strengths is critical to your long-term success, and what organisations can do to stop focusing on individual weaknesses. This week, I'm speaking to Melitta, who is the Head of Learning and Development at SIG. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more. So I wanted to begin with what got you immersed in the world of strengths-based assessment and focusing on your natural strengths.
Yeah. Look, it was quite some time ago, and I think, like all of these things, when I first came across it, it was for me personally, and I just saw such a marked difference in understanding and shifting my mindset from what aren't I good at to where actually can I excel and what can I do naturally and how do I actually lean into that. And so from there, when I moved into cultural transformation, we started to experiment with teams, and we really started to see those teams that embraced the concept of strengths, even without tools. We're starting to see higher performance as a team, and we're starting to form better teams faster and reach a high-performing zone at a much faster rate. So that's probably where it started, and it's evolved from there over the 10 or 15 years.
Can you explain what is strengths-based assessment for those that don't know?
Yeah, so when we look at strengths, it really comes back to what are the ways in which you naturally think and the ways you naturally feel and the way in which you naturally behave. And so if you think about it under pressure, what's your default? And so what strengths assessment tries to do is to really codify that and give you a language to be able to articulate where are you at your best. And when you're under pressure, when you're getting high performance, what's the ways in which you do that? What are the ways in which you think that really lean into high performance? So the intent is to give you a language so you can better understand it and help others understand you at your best. I think about it as a bit like a star shape. You have points of excellence. Don't be well-rounded. It's not about being well-rounded. It's having those points of excellence and then finding others that can fit those gaps. So you don't have to be great at everything.
It's interesting because organisations normally focus on what we're not good at, what are our weaknesses, and they constantly try to improve our weaknesses. What's your view on weaknesses and how organisations typically go about it?
Well, there's probably two things that I think about. One is when we think about a strength and a weakness, one way to think about that is a strength is something that makes you feel strong. So there might be things that you're really great at, but you've probably had to learn to be great at them, and you don't maybe perhaps want to do that all the time. A weakness, likewise, is something that makes you feel weak, so it really does deplete your energy, and things take a lot longer. It doesn't come as naturally. So I think for weaknesses and for organisations and how they think about that, one of the shifts that I've seen that really help to do that is to understand, well, where are my strengths? How do they show up, not just productively, but also unproductively? So sometimes it's not just about what your weaknesses are, it's how your strengths overplaying in order to, that perhaps might get in the way of performance. And when I think about weaknesses from an organisational context, I think we're just much smarter to try and find ways to manage around it.
What can organisations do to obviously shift their whole culture from focusing on weaknesses to moving it more into a strengths-based culture and environment and building teams around their natural strengths? What should organisations do there?
Well, that's a multi-year thing that organisations take on. But the first step is really accepting strengths. And so I think about it from an inclusion lens. How do you first build awareness of what people's strengths are? And that often starts with self. So am I comfortable to explain my own strengths to you? And if I can't do that, my team doesn't have a chance of being able to do that. So it's first in helping people understand and articulate and have language for their own strengths and connecting where that adds value and where that leans into high performance. Secondly, it's about bringing teams together to create that common language, to understand the strengths of others, and really how can I borrow their strengths? How do they complement mine? Where are our points of connection in order that when we've got a shared goal or when we're working towards something, what do I bring and what do you bring in, and how they complement? So I think if you can get those two things happening, you're off to a really great start as an organisation.
How do I, as an individual, how do I find out about what my natural strengths are?
Well, there's a number of different assessments. So you could go onto any plethora of assessments. Gallup play really well in this space. Values in action, so VIA play really well in this space. Realise, strengths play really well in this space. But if you wanted to do it without an assessment, you could really just reflect on what are the activities, where is it, what are the things that you do that really give you energy. So what puts the pep in your step? Where do you find yourself lost in time? You know, what feels like 10 minutes but actually is 2 hours? What's the stuff that you get really immersed in? And those are probably signs of a strength. When you're enjoying it, when you lose that sense of time, and you pick things up really quickly. So I think any one of those things can help you get a really great understanding of your strengths.
So if I know my strengths and I'm working in an organisation where it's not playing on my natural strengths, how do I approach my boss or manager and say, look, I'm not feeling energised, or I'm not playing to my strengths? How do I communicate to my boss, manager, that these are my natural strengths? Can we incorporate some more of my strengths into my job every day?
Great question. The first question I always ask when I do strengths work in organisations, probably about 10% of the time I have someone do a little tap on the shoulder to say, I think I'm in the wrong job. And the first question I always ask is do you have other strengths that we can lean in or dial up in order to get the work done? So can we just think about doing the work differently, and what might that look like? Are there other strengths that you can pull in from other people to get the work done? And if those avenues have been exhausted, then I think it's a conversation around how can we look at the type of work, and is there micro changes that can be made within the scope of the role in order to incorporate more of that individual leaning in on their strengths before any drastic measures of complete changes of roles.
Have you ever met someone that says, look, has gone through that whole process and said, I've got to just change my career completely?
Not necessarily complete change of career, but certainly that realisation that I'm in the wrong role, I'm in the wrong industry, or it's time for a change. And I think when people realise that, it's almost the weight off the shoulders, because it helps to put some facts to the feelings that they've had, and it's not that they are incompetent, and it's not that they're incapable of doing the job. It's just a mismatch of where you're at your best and what the role requires. So it's almost a weight off and a focus towards finding the best fit for that individual.
What do I do about my, I suppose, weaknesses? Do I just shove them in one corner and say, I'm just going to forget you altogether, or do I still develop them a little bit, or do I just focus on my strengths? What do I do with them?
Great question. It's multi-pronged. So I think when you're thinking about your weaknesses, it depends on how they're impacting your role. If you can find ways to manage around that. Now, I often say it's not what you don't have that gets you into the biggest trouble, it's what you do naturally that gets you into the biggest trouble. So your strengths have blind spots. So if you're naturally inclined and biased towards action over deep thinking, you might find yourself under pressure moving too quickly before the right amount of thinking has been done up front. And so it's not actually what you don't have, it's what you do have overused. So often it's building that awareness of where are my points of excellence stinging. Right. Then in terms of if there are gaps, I think it's around really understanding, well, how do I get by? How do I manage around to minimise the impact on performance?
Interesting. I've never thought about it that way in terms of weakness. Our strengths can be our biggest blocker.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating, and when we work, particularly when we work with senior leaders, that's the part that has the biggest realisation that my points of excellence can sting and be overplayed, particularly under pressure. So it's understanding that when you are under pressure, your natural default is to fall back on what feels most naturally, and that's your natural strengths.
At what point in someone's career should they say, look, I should really look into my strengths a little further? Is it early on in their career, once they've reached senior leadership? What stage would you suggest?
Earlier is better. I think with any type of intervention, and particularly in self-awareness, the earlier you can do it, the better, or just really any time. And I say that when you're looking to improve the impact that you have, understanding how you go about delivering that impact in a way that's the most efficient and effective for you, anytime you're on that path to understand how do I increase my performance, that's a great time to start thinking about your strengths.
That's good, thanks. And so from a team point of view, what do companies need to do to discover everyone's strengths? What should they do there and to develop that?
Great. I think that one of the best things that organisations can do is to create a common language. I think velocity has a way to play inside an organisation. The quicker that you can support people understanding their strengths in a common way or a common language, the easier it is for an organisation. What happens when you move slowly is you almost create two groups of people. Those that have the realisation of strengths, and so if you're pulling them out of the system, giving them a language around strengths and putting them back into a system that doesn't talk about strengths, it becomes really difficult. So the more that you can work with intact teams across the organisation and give them one common language. And what I often say is one common language means use one diagnostic tool or one strengths profiling tool for the whole organisation. Make a very conscious choice as to what is the right tool for the organisation based on the organisational objectives, and use that. The challenge when you've got if you're not prescriptive about that, is you might have several different tools or assessments, and they may say the same thing but slightly differently, and it's enough to create tension in the system that has people not understanding your strengths because I don't understand the language in which you're using compared to the language that I'm using.
Okay. In terms of, so everyone in the team knows, is doing the same strengths assessment. How do I then communicate to someone else, these are my strengths, and what does this strength mean? How do I communicate that to someone?
When I've worked with different organisations, we really look at doing it as intact teams, so taking a whole team through the journey to help everyone understand what all of these strengths actually mean. Where are they at their best? What do the blind spots look like? How do we create a common language? And what we typically do with teams is set up a couple of challenges. And the first one is to spot strengths in others. So really over the course of 30 or 60 days for teams to watch for their peers, their direct reports or their managers' strengths in action and provide feedback of where that added value. Okay. And so it's that practice of seeing other people's strengths in action and then transitioning from intentionally borrowing someone else's strength. So when you've got a big objective, when you've got a big deadline, when you've got a key piece of work that needs to be delivered and delivered well, intentionally seeking out someone else's strength to experiment borrowing their strength. And it starts to increase the vernacular across the team and the practice of understanding other people's, seeing them in action and knowing when to pull them in for the collective performance.
And that's it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. I'm off to continue my quest to find more amazing people within the legal profession and beyond. Thank you for watching. Thank you for recommending this video to your friends. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel, where I'll see you soon.